So, are you a mammal? Yeah, hopefully. Are you a baby? Probably not if you're watching this video. Should you be consuming dairy products? A lot of people will tell you you shouldn't because it's baby food and therefore it's inappropriate and there has got to be some mystical, magical reason why it therefore is bad for you in some way. And then there are other people who will point out to you the amazing nutrient content of dairy with all its amino acids and its vitamins. It's very rich in nutrients because it's designed to stimulate the growth and development of a young mammal. So what's the correct answer? Welcome to ShapeFixer. I'm Andrew. I am a nutritionist and I'm a scientist, and I want to get into the actual science of dairy in a way that's easy for people to understand who don't have a formal education in science necessarily, so that you can make up your mind about your dairy consumption and whether or not it's appropriate for you. Because believe it or not, there is a very personal element to this. And I don't just mean the personal aspects of I like it, I don't like it. I'm talking about whether or not your body is even able to deal with it. So let's go through people, the first groups of people who really should not be consuming dairy and take them off the table. The first group of people is a very, very tiny percentage of the population who are allergic to casein. Casein is the main protein in milk. It can be up to 80% of the milk in the case of cow's milk. In other animals, it might only be 40 or 50%, but it is the main protein. And there are some people who have a complete inability to digest casein. So that protein does not break down in their stomach acid like proteins should. It goes through their system into the gut, where they then have a massive allergic reaction. If you are one of those people, it's almost 100% guaranteed that you will already know that, because you will have been living with that your whole life and you will already be avoiding dairy products because of the casein content. So that group of people, they have no need to follow the rest of this video because it's irrelevant, because you can't eat it. It's highly toxic to you and highly dangerous, but it is a tiny percentage of the population. The next group of people who need to at least be careful with dairy are those who are lactose intolerant. Now, being lactose intolerant is not the same as being allergic. Being lactose intolerant is more common than being allergic to casein. So let's talk about lactose intolerance and what that means, just very briefly. And if you haven't seen my video on sugars, I'm going to link it below here. Go and have a look at that, what explains to you in a lot more detail how lactose works. But briefly, lactose is a type of sugar that is made up of two other sugars. Okay, so each molecule or particle of lactose contains one glucose molecule and one galactose molecule. Galactose is a not very common form of sugar, and it's generally only found in dairy anyway. But galactose and glucose, which we all know about because that's the common sugar, that's what you measure when you check your blood sugar. The glucose and the galactose, that makes lactose, okay? Lactose, milk sugar. That goes into your system and gets broken apart. The glucose gets sucked straight into your bloodstream, that's blood sugar. Galactose, you can't do anything with. So, like other substances that you can't do anything with, it has to get sent to the liver to be processed, like fructose or fruit sugar and alcohol. Goes to the liver, gets processed in the liver, turned into glucose, and then released later into your bloodstream. So it all ends up as glucose, all the lactose in the dairy. If you cannot separate them, you don't have the enzyme, it's called lactase. If you don't have this enzyme to separate the glucose and the galactose, in other words, to break down the lactose or the milk sugar, then it stays intact and you don't absorb it. It goes into your gut and it causes inflammation, and it causes your intolerance, and it can give you an upset stomach if you have enough, and you don't generally need very much. Now, this can be a genetic thing. So you could be born with a lactose intolerance, or it can happen later in life. It's still genetic. It just means those genes had what we call a little timer effect on them, and they switched on. Genes switch on and off at different times during your life, and it might have just switched on later. So a lot of people develop a lactose intolerance a little bit later in life. My father-in-law is a classic example. He spent his whole life with no problems, and now he can't so much as have an ice cream or have any milk or any lactose at all because it upsets his stomach. So there's another group of people who should at least be very careful with dairy consumption and try to have the fatty dairy and not the dairy where the lactose is. Now, the lactose in milk is not in the cream. So he can drink cream. He can have some cheeses so long as they're high-fat cheeses and they don't have too much lactose in them. So something like skimmed milk or fat-free milk would be terrible for someone who's lactose intolerant because you're just increasing the sugar content. Once you take the cream out of milk, you're left with basically lactose water or sugar water. So if you're lactose intolerant, avoid dairy, generally speaking, but you can have some fatty cheeses, and butter is generally fine, and cream is absolutely fine. Okay, so all that means is that there's a small group of people who should have either be very careful with it or avoid it altogether. But what about the rest of us? How does this affect the rest of us? Well, there's another thing that happens with dairy. Dairy is full of Cassomorphins. Now, a Cassomorphin comes from the casein, which is the protein that I discussed before. And as your protein is getting broken down in your gut system, it gets broken down into amino acids, which are the building blocks. Check my video that explains how proteins are built up. Link that down here too. And then it gets absorbed through your gut wall. If you have a very permeable gut wall or leaky gut syndrome, which a lot of people have, mostly because we consume too many grains and we damage our gut wall with things like gluten and also too much sugar in our diet, it is possible that casein gets broken down to a point, but not completely, and you absorb what are called peptides, which are strings of amino acids that haven't been completely disassembled. And casomorphin is a peptide or a fragment of this casein protein that if it gets into your bloodstream, it can make its way to your brain, and then it acts as an opioid, and it creates an addiction. So if you know someone who appears to be almost addicted to, say, cheese, it's very likely that as they consume cheese, dairy, that casomorphin is making its way to their brain and making them want more and more and more, and it's almost an insatiable drive to keep eating cheese. This is useful for a calf because it's important for the calf to drink as much milk as possible, to grow as quickly as possible. So a calf doesn't know when to stop because it's got this addiction to its mother's milk because of the casomorphins. A calf's intake of milk is actually controlled by the mother. So you will often see, if you're privileged enough to have access to the countryside, and you might have seen this, where the mother will shrug the calf off or kick it away when she's kind of not in the mood. Really, it's her way of controlling the milk intake. The calf is just constantly looking for the udder. So if you do have a gut that is allowing these peptides to get through, you could develop an addiction to dairy. So if you are eating a lot of cheese, craving a big glass of milk, you need to be very careful, and I would suggest you probably just limit your dairy altogether. But what about all those good things? Okay, high in really healthy fats, high in fat-soluble vitamins. Milk contains all 9 of the most essential amino acids that we need. But none of those things, not the calcium, the vitamin D, the magnesium, none of those things in the milk or in the dairy are things that you cannot get somewhere else. So if you eat a proper, healthy, animal-based diet with lots of meat and lots of fat, oily fish, chicken skin, you don't have to eat dairy. You can, if you're not allergic to casein, if you're not lactose intolerant, and if you are not prone to addiction, prone to these peptides, Cassomorphins getting through to your brain and then making you overeat like a calf that's out of control. If you don't have those issues and you really like a bit of cheese on your meat, or you like a little bit of full cream milk, or better still cream on your coffee, it's absolutely fine. It's not going to do you any harm. It can be very useful. It's certainly better than starving. If you've got nothing else to eat, milk is really good. It's full of nutrients and will give you just about everything you need. But the point is, you don't actually have to. Dairy is not essential. The argument that it's meant for babies is totally irrelevant. That doesn't automatically mean that it's no good for us. It's fine for you so long as you don't have any of those issues that I discussed. If you're unsure, well, avoid it then. Nothing wrong with that either. It's not essential. You don't have to consume dairy. I do, because I'm not lactose intolerant, I'm not allergic, and I'm on a carnivore diet, so I've kind of restricted the foods that are available to me. So I like having butter that I can consume, that I can increase my fat intake. For example, if I'm eating chicken, which is quite lean, we cook in either lard, tallow, or butter. And I like cheese as a sort of garnish on some of my dishes, and I'm fine with that because I can. So if you can, go ahead. If you can't, obviously don't. If you're unsure, avoid it. You don't really need it, but you'll be fine. It doesn't cause cancer. It doesn't do any of those other crazy things that you hear, sort of autism and all that stuff. There's no science behind any of that nonsense. And there you go. Your call. Dairy, not dairy. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel and check out the videos below that explain sugar a bit better and lactose and how that works, and also what peptides are. Peptides, proteins, amino acids. It's down here. It's down below in the show notes.